I was between jobs, and Toon Lindsay on the board of MANNA FoodBank called me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Not much." And she said, "I'm on the board of the food bank." And I said, "What's a food bank?"
I was one of the founding members of the Stone Soup Collective in Asheville in the late 70s and early 80s.
My history with food banking goes back 30 years. So the hunger situation got my attention way back in 1972.
I had traveled around the world, and I had also lived in an area of Atlanta where people were hungry.
I came to MANNA in April of 2011, and prior to that I'd been working for 8.5 years for the U.S. Peace Corps.
And we began to go see people and see who would give us some food, who would support the food bank in the very earliest stages.
I felt like I could not excite people if I had this job, and when I took it, about a crisis in hunger, because most people in Buncombe County don't know that there's a crisis in hunger.
My attention was focused on domestic hunger because suddenly everything seemed to change.
Stuart Humphrey, the head of Elida Homes for Children, offered the oldest building on their campus, a really 100-year-old dormitory, for the first home for MANNA FoodBank.
Asheville changes everything, as I think it does for everything in my life.
My office was in the hallway with a kerosene heater to make it warm enough to work in there. I mean, those were just the early days.
But in Asheville and at MANNA FoodBank, I found a whole new kind of food banking.
Originally, MANNA stood for Mountain Area Nutritional Needs Alliance. It's MANNA FoodBank. And going back to the old manna from heaven, which, God provided enough food for every day.
This food bank focuses more on rural hunger, which is a very different face, a very different difficulty than the more urban hunger I had experienced while in New Jersey.
I thought that was a perfect opportunity for me to be really able to engage, to be in an area of the country where there was great need.
In this area, it's very serious. I would cut out a map, I would cut out the high poverty areas, and I'd go to a Rotary Club and say, draw lines of where you go to work, how you go to Rotary Club, where you go to worship. People drive around poverty. We don't drive through it. We don't see it. It's right here in our backyard.
My name is Carolyn Wallace, and I was the founding director of MANNA FoodBank, and I was there from 1983 till the end of 1987.
I'm Toby Ives, and I was here from 1988 through 2004.
My name is Kitty Schaller, and I was the director from 2004 to 2011.
My name is Cindy Threlkeld. I'm the executive director at MANNA FoodBank.
Picture stuff. We got organic.
One of the things that continually astounds me is that 40% of the food in this country goes to waste. And yet in Western North Carolina, 1 in 6 of our neighbors are living with the reality of hunger and food insecurity.
It's two-sided. It's grim, but it is doable.
People think that, it's just a matter of food. And when you're trying to eke out a living, eke out a life in a real bad economy, the needs are a tapestry. It's just woven together.
In the last 7 years, since 2005, which was before the economic downturn, we were able to distribute 5.7 million pounds of food. Last year, we distributed 11.2 million pounds. That's a 91% increase in just 7 years.
We have to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. Is that we want to fill that glass up with water, and we'll do whatever it takes over however long it takes to do that.
Food banks have evolved from initially just getting excess food to hungry people. Now we are more concerned with what are the root causes of the problem.
Food banking has tried, throughout the 30 years of MANNA's history, to try to be the one that can help get that food that would potentially otherwise go to waste into the hands of the people that need it.
It's our job to educate folks so that they know that we're making a difference. We have a reason in food banking to know what the larger issues are.
At the end of the day, this cannot be solely a charitable effort. We can't just feed people directly.
So there's advocacy, there's education. We didn't do much of that in the early years, but now the food banks are much more proactive in going after the root causes of poverty and hunger. And I think that that is a very healthy thing.
You know, the agencies were our primary reason for being from the very beginning.
I think a lot of people still believe that food banking is the direct service agency. And in fact, the best thing that MANNA does, the best thing that food banks do across the country, is to work with a very robust organization of independent agencies.
We were the middle people, you know, to get food for them. And of course, we were part of Second Harvest, which is what the National Network of Food Banks was called in those days. And if we had not had Second Harvest, we wouldn't have made it either.
Food banking is very much built on a relationship with the charitable agencies that are on the front line.
Well, when I first came, there were about 15 agencies in 11 counties of western North Carolina who had indicated an interest in what the food bank had to offer.
Those are food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters for homeless, for battered folk.
A lot of different kinds of agencies that had some food component, and they didn't have enough food to even begin to meet the need. It was this cooperative relationship to work on hunger needs in our part of the state through the agencies that serve people directly.
But it is that level of community support, community engagement all over the mountains that makes our agencies strong and makes them the right way to reach people who are in need. One of the things that is really attractive to me about food banking is that it's so apparent. It's so easy to visit and understand. It appeals to business people because it really looks like a business.
Well, the private sector, without the private sector, we would not have the funds to do any of it.
MANNA FoodBank is probably one of the best examples you can find of a private-public partnership.
The majority of the food is donated by the business sector. The business sector supports annual events, including the Blue Jean Ball and the Giving Tree at Christmas and many, many other opportunities.
If the railroad tracks are not in place, and that takes money to run the operation, then the carloads, the train carloads of food have no tracks to run on.
And that was one of the big jobs of the board of directors and mine too, is to raise awareness of folks and help them to see what the need was.
But getting that food has almost assuredly got to come from food producers.
And the business sector gives us in-kind opportunities, trucks, equipment, the rollers that I'm sitting on. We get lots from the business community, and they have been very, very good to the food bank.
And so we worked on that over several years, and both in terms of food and equipment and money and volunteers.
What I saw in MANNA and what I saw in food banking was an amazing commitment on the part of volunteers. I experienced that in New Jersey as well.
I used to tell the volunteers, and say, oh, you're going to volunteer, that's wonderful. We're going to treat you like a paid employee.
Well, MANNA wouldn't exist if it weren't for volunteers. 6,500 volunteers last year. It was over 46,000 volunteer hours.
If I had to describe what I hope to find in a volunteer, one is always there, and that is that they're open-handed.
It's just like we pay you, and we're going to treat you on a two-way street. We're going to expect you to be here on time. We are going to be prepared for you and have all the equipment ready for you to go to work right away.
It's a very somber purpose that we're going about, but that doesn't mean we can't go about it with a joyful spirit.
People very much find community in their volunteering.
So that's how we're going to treat you, because we depend on you.
I think they come with an open heart, ready to help people, ready to really understand and help people who are in need.
The volunteers respond to that, particularly if when they get here, they see their job laid out, ready to do.
What I hope they develop is an open-mindedness to really see the plight of people in need, to see their faces, but to go beyond their faces, to see their circumstances.
And I think that's really what it takes to be able to be engaged in this over the long term, and that's what helps people keep coming back through the doors.
It's hard for me to believe that we're now, in the year 2013, and these issues are still so large. If it wasn't for food banks and food pantries and some of the spiritual religious institutions, the problem would be a lot worse than it is.
The food bank and the volunteers and the donors and the businesses involved have come to an incredible point. Are we halfway? Are we 1/4 of the way? 3/4 of the way? I don't know, but we're not all the way.
And I just want us to choose to take our consciousness to another level and to try to work toward a tipping point in the connected minds of all people in our culture, that it is unacceptable to have people in our culture who do not have enough food to eat.
And it's when we lay eyes on it, come close to it, that I think it really grabs us.
And so I encourage folks to think of the wonderful things they've done and the opportunity to go the next mile. Keep the food bank in your time, in your wallet, in your heart for the future, and let's do it together.